Wondering where those juicy, iconic burgers have gone off the dinner menu? Diner hopping like never before to restore 20 burgers to their former mouth-watering glory. Time to patty up. If pizza and pineapples made your stomach churn, then get ready for the Aloha burger. Pineapples nestled between a 12-ounce grilled beef patty, onions, and teriyaki sauce, this burger is tangy and sweet to the max. Buffalo sauce was also a substitute for the teriyaki in some restaurants. People will tell you the flavors balance each other out, and for some folk it really might be a delicious one to order. For most, though, the burger just did not take off very well outside of states like Hawaii. Over there, pineapples as a topping in savory dishes was already an established culinary habit. Not exactly rocket science figuring out why this one could not last on the dinner menus. Think of this as more of a forgotten cult classic with a dedicated niche following. Speaking of pizzas, this next one does not just copy an ingredient, it takes the entire pizza into a burger to make the pizza burger. A thick beef patty packed between two pizza flatbreads and topped with pepperoni with cheese made for a controversial burger. A lot of parents especially questioned the health risks such a fatty burger might have, and they were right to. Not as much as the Aloha burger, but it definitely raised some eyebrows and some revenue alike, though that was more so for experimental fusion food joints. Taste-wise, this was not too bad though. It was extremely heavy and greasy. America would slowly gravitate towards less fatty foods and more healthier ones, so you can guess why people dropped this off their orders. Restaurants did the same with their menus around the 80s, because you cannot calorie count and have pizza burgers. Ham and cheese stuffed burger was not controversial nor experimental and is actually pretty simple. Packed to the brim with cheese and ham in soft brioche buns, a bit of deli ham and some Old Bay seasoning were all you needed. Early 2000s saw a lot of love for this versatile dish that could be incorporated in a million different ways. Smoked ham or a mix of ground beef and ham, or even grilled bacon to add a classic American twist to a dish Uncle Sam already would have devoured. However, this eventually stopped being served, and we honestly could not pinpoint one reason. But it is probably because it was not too filling. Prices are much higher nowadays, and if people are going to order, they want their stomachs full for the next 5 to 6 hours afterwards at least. Continuing the trend of simple burgers, we have olive burgers, which are just salty olives on top of a ground beef patty with American cheese. Easy to prepare and quick to cook, these got popular around the 1967's Michigan and really paved the way for olives to be used as a topping in burgers. Before this you would see them, but they were not the main attraction of a hamburger. Olive burgers, coming around with a well-balanced mix of onions, bacon, and the usual flavors Americans remember having with their burgers, really made a point. Definitely a game-changer burger that made its mark in America's history with ground beef and buns, even if it did not stay for too long. Guess you could say olive burgers faded away because as time passed, olives became a regular topping for burgers, and having a separate burger called the olive burger sounded confusing on menus. An extremely popular staple of Route 66 in California was the California burger, a trademark of the state. However, it was actually invented much earlier, around 1926 in the state. Going into any burger joint down the coast, you could always expect lettuce, avocado, and a heaping helping of cheese on your burger. Tomato slices would also be on the burger in 9 restaurants out of 10, or else the burger was not complete. Burgers were really plain back then, they would just involve patties and cheese. California burgers were one of the first new flavors in Burger Town. Double beef patty variants came around when it got so popular, people just needed more. Nowadays, this is just known as a common burger, but back then it was the pride and joy of California. Cajun burgers gave more steam to the trend of easy-to-make burgers that could be made at home. Ground beef patties that were fried and topped with Cajun seasoning were the best parts of eating a Cajun burger. Louisiana often had many corners that would feature Cajun cuisine, and they would have this as a reasonable but full meal. Down any alley or on any street at a Cajun food stall, people would often gather around to eat what was a delicious but affordable dish. However, nowadays, there has been a decline in the use of Cajun overall in sandwiches. Restaurants and joints that would be known for a good Cajun burger are largely a thing of the past as of today. Speaking of cost-efficient foods, chili burgers were just as popular in states throughout the 1970s. Maybe it was a phase that really appreciated spice instead of just cheese and salt? Contrarily, though, cheddar cheese was often used in chili burgers, but the difference was in the chili spread. Elevating the flavors of an already mean grilled patty, people would use red chili or green or make sauces out of bell peppers and incorporate different vegetables. Cookouts saw so much love for chili burgers back then that whether or not it was on the menu became an afterthought. Technology leaves things behind. Nowadays, it is much easier to cook better and more complex burgers, so this faded from menus across the states. Moving on from commonly found burgers, the peanut butter burger was introduced in diners throughout Missouri. Grilled bacon and pepper jack cheese on a hamburger patty, absolutely drenched in peanut butter. Intimidating to some but interesting to others, people gave these a try and eventually it became very popular in restaurants. A twist from the usual but still cheap and delicious, peanut butter burgers became a regular of dinner menus around the 1960s, but eventually they disappeared. Despite how many people would even make the burger at home with variations like beef jerky instead of bacon, it faded from dinner menus. Probably because it was not very kid-friendly, and restaurants started following that wave a long while ago for us. Breakfast burgers are like the peanut butter burger in the sense that they involve similar use of breakfast ingredients mixed with typical burger items. Mixing grilled bacon, cheese, and burger sauce with vegetables on toasted bread made for something that was rare back then. Restaurants quickly caught on to the concept of a cheap, tasty, and healthy breakfast burger and realized its potential popularity. Soon enough, breakfast burgers became a go-to dish available readily in every diner. Given the increased popularity, different restaurants customized the burger according to their tastes. Some chefs added turkey patties and some added fried bacon instead of grilled. Breakfast burgers were served until the 90s when diners began to fade from the country, causing the burger to vanish. Following the trend of experimenting with burgers, the blue cheese burger entered menus. Completely caked in blue cheese, the patty would come with grilled onions and mushrooms or olives for an extremely unique burger thrill. One that, early on back then in the 30s, was pretty innovative. People would usually have double patty blue cheeseburgers at family grills, and burger joints had it as their best seller. Especially in states like Kentucky and Tennessee, where practically every burger place had this dish on the menu. Blue cheese burger was often ranging from cheap to pricey depending on which diner you visited, but the price tag did not scare people away. Sadly, that craze is a thing of the past because blue cheese has been popularized so much that people are tired of it. Days where blue cheese burgers were new and trendy burgers to try in town are a thing of the distant past. The next one on the list is the Greek burger, which is your typical burger but superpowered with rare ingredients. Greek Kasseri cheese and sheep's milk feta, along with spices and sauces that would give it a profound but dynamically new taste. Burger joints were always in the search of what could be the next big burger. Greek burgers made an entry onto the scene sometime around the 50s, but it is unclear. However, it left a legacy because ingredients like olives and cucumbers are now common in American burger cuisine, going along with America's growing trend of preferring healthier alternatives of their unhealthy favorites. Since the days when it was first brought onto the menus of burger joints, the Greek burger is now much less popular and people just call it a feta cheeseburger. Brie and cranberry burger is a forgotten burger that replaced the cheese and sauce people regularly put on their cheeseburger. You might be able to guess by now that America was in a place where it was playing more with sauces and cheeses than the patty itself. Brie and cranberry burgers were the result of such trends at a time when people started using wedges of brie or sweet cranberry sauce. Just the right amount of sweet while keeping the burger itself savory and tangy. This became a really big hit. People would even add grilled bacon strips or jerky when they made it themselves. Cranberry sauce is a bit too sweet for the palates of Americans nowadays, though, so the burger has faded out largely. Tex-Mex burgers were a statement in the burger world of America. The success of Tex-Mex burgers showed people were expecting much different toppings than what they are used to. Ground beef patties that would be covered with jalapenos, pepper jack cheese, and fried beans, as well as Tex-Mex sauce and salsa. An absolute must-have at Latin American restaurants and Mexican burger joints across the nation, the Tex-Mex burger is where chefs really do not hold back on the spice. Tex-Mex burgers were particularly well received in the South, and people there still did not stop adding grilled bacon. Home versions of it were a little playful, but mostly they would stick to the recipe. Sadly, the burgers are not too common anymore because spice tolerances are much lower in America than before. Love for mushrooms was growing, creating room in the market for a Swiss mushroom burger. Burgers that had mushrooms so far would have them as a topping, but they would just be diced or slightly fried, so there was a hunger for an authentic mushroom burger. Swiss mushroom burgers worked so well because the mushrooms were very particularly sautéed, and Swiss cheese was specifically picked to complement the mushrooms in most places. Recipes that were common in the American burger scene often stressed on how both of those really needed to work together. As a result, burger fanatics all over the States went insane over this one. Nowadays, again, while it was great for its time, recipes like this have become too commonplace to be very popular on menus presently. Buffalo burgers are different from the ones on the list so far because the standard beef patty was replaced with buffalo meat. You see, buffalo burgers have either water buffalo meat or bison meat, which makes for a very tender but sweet patty. Top that with buffalo sauce with a sweet side of sweeter potato fries, and you have yourself a nationwide bestseller. Buffalo burgers were just what Americans craving a different kind of taste than the usual standards needed. While they were pretty popular when they came around first in states like Texas and Missouri, buffalo burgers eventually lost their popularity and are rarely on menus today. If the Aloha burger at the start was too much of a shock for you, then the Hawaiian burger may actually make you cringe. Ham and pineapple on a beef patty with teriyaki sauce of all sauces. To be frank, the flavors were way too much for most people when it initially came out in the recent decades. However, when people did give it a shot, some developed a taste for it, and as a result, it became a niche classic at some joints. Mostly Hawaiian burger places that stuck to the theme pretty hard. What you would get was pretty authentic, and the taste was not the greatest, but not an abomination either. Still, a burger this bold would have a difficult time being a bestseller. Eventually, the Hawaiian burger was replaced on menus with newer burgers that were not too experimental. French onion burgers are actually a lot easier to handle for most normal citizens than the Hawaiian burger. What we deal with here is lean ground beef patties with Worcestershire sauce, onion soup mixes, and French caramelized onions. All in all, you had yourself an extremely delicious dish that took around 15 minutes to prepare and could be made with homemade ingredients. It is always great when a recipe goes along with local favorites like bacon and other types of cheese, so that helped this one stay in menus for a long time. Ultimately, French onion burgers faded off the menus. However, the method of adding caramelized onions onto burgers became a standard practice for restaurants. Guacamole burgers took something that American burgers already had and cranked it up to an 11. Guacamole has been such a long-time obsession in American burger culture that it is hard to remember a period when it wasn't included. Maybe when burgers were first introduced and only ham and cheese were used. Guacamole burgers can often be found being served alongside spicy fries with avocados and jalapenos. People usually would not pair bacon with this, though some would obviously. Rather, they would kick it up even more with bell peppers. Fried onion rings also made for such a great crispy factor that completed the burger. All in all, it is definitely a burger that a more spice-oriented burger lover would go for. Guacamole as a very prominent topping is not something America is currently too fond of, so this burger has been largely forgotten and taken off of menus. Similarly, ranch burgers became popular because it took an ingredient that was a staple of burgers already in like half the nation and made it the main selling point. Ranch burgers were typically a favorite among families in the 50s and 70s who wanted to take a break from the typical ham or cheeseburger. When your kids keep asking for something new and you do not know what to do, ranch dressing can be a cheap and convenient savior. This led to ranch burgers becoming a mainstay on family menus in many parts of the nation. Restaurants eventually started noticing that, and they began coming out with their own ranch burgers, so it shifted from homemade comfort food to takeout too. While the ranch burger had a great run, it is not exciting enough to be on most menus today because people are very used to ranch now. Traditional Reuben sandwiches paved the way for Reuben burgers, which, although most restaurants did not adhere strictly to the original recipe, performed very well across the USA. Reuben burgers would consist of Swiss cheese and Russian dressing with sauerkraut. Traditionally, you would have this with rye bread, but most burger joints would be okay with brioche buns or potato buns. People may also fondly remember beef patties instead of thinly sliced beef, as per old-school Reuben standards. To be honest, we think they were an improvement because the dish clearly always had the potential to work well as a burger. The 90s just happened to tap into it at last, and thank God they did. Sadly, it did not stay long enough to make onto menus today, and finding one would be pretty hard. Still, anyone who remembers a Reuben burger knows how awesome they were. That ends our list of forgotten burgers that vanished from dinner menus across the states. Would you get any now? If you would, give the video a like and subscribe.